Open the podcast bay door as hell.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 67 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits. But I've found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here, you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. It's time for me to shout out this month's patrons. Aaron Borst, Matthew Saint, Lyndon Onstead, Utuk Zul, Carla Hoffman, Julio Herrera, and Forrest Woodward continue to earn my sincere thanks in their help. I'm just one patron short of covering hosting and domain costs for the show, so if you want to put me over the top, and to hear outtakes from nearly every episode and get scripts of past shows, simply visit patreon.com/welcome to Geektown and pledge $1 per month. Thanks! In case you don't follow comic book news, it's been announced that Jonathan Majors, the male lead on Lovecraft Country, will be playing Kang the Conqueror in Ant-Man 3, possibly setting him up as the big bad for the next phase of Marvel movies. Because of that news, I thought it especially appropriate to cover this question from listener Anthony H. He asked, what elements from the first 3 Fantastic Four movies were canon? What should people remember about the Baxter Building's most famous denizens going into future movies? How does the Fantastic Four tie into a villain mostly known for fighting the Avengers? We'll get there, but first, let's answer Anthony's question by diving into the non-MCU Fantastic Four movies that have been released, and see how faithful they were to the source material. I'm going to very quickly gloss over the unreleased 1994 movie produced by Roger Corman for a couple of reasons. First, the producers never intended it for widescreen release, being only a stalling tactic to keep the rights to Marvel's first family. Although, sadly, most of the cast and crew were not aware of this. Check out the documentary titled Doomed for the full backstory. Secondly, as it hasn't been released officially, the only people who have seen it are hardcore completionists like myself who bought a VHS copy at a con or otherwise found an illegal copy. But I will say that of all the movies, this one has the most comic-accurate costumes, especially for Doctor Doom. The actual FF costumes get the color and patterns basically right, but could have used a little more budget to shape the bodies underneath the costumes, as had been seen in then contemporary films and TV shows like Batman and The Flash. The effects are very low budget. Johnny only fully flames on once in the movie, but you can tell everyone had their hearts in the right place. Now, let's start in earnest by looking at the first issue of the Fantastic Four comic by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, where the team's origin is explained, so we can contrast that to the movies. 2 of the 3 movies are origin films, so this is where a lot of the comparisons will focus. Reed Richards is a scientist looking to beat the commies and be the first man in space. This was published in August of 1961, just 4 months after Yuri Gagarin had claimed that title in real life, so there's a little wish fulfillment here. With his best friend, Ben Grimm, fiancée Sue Storm and Sue's brother Johnny. The latter two don't have any expertise in this matter, but are basically there for moral support. Reed and the others sneak onto the base and take off without clearance. Unfortunately, cosmic rays in space affect the four astronauts, and they end up crashing back down to Earth, quickly discovering that the radiation has changed them in varying ways, giving them their superpowers. They decide to band together to use their powers for good as Mr. Fantastic, the Invisible Girl, the Human Torch, and the Thing, or collectively, the Fantastic Four. Quick side note, cosmic rays are a real thing, but are not dangerous until you are far out of Earth's magnetosphere. Second side note, although everyone else's powers have pretty much stayed the same, Sue's powers originally were just to turn herself invisible. Then she learned to turn other objects invisible, and finally create invisible force fields she could manipulate both defensively and offensively. She went from the weakest character, often being used as a damsel in distress in the stories, to being the most powerful member of the family. She's also the only Fantastic Four member to change her codename, finally graduating from the Invisible Girl to the Invisible Woman in Fantastic Four number 280, written and drawn by John Byrne. Now, in 1961, the space race was very topical, and made total sense for a superhero origin story. However, by 2005, when the first Fantastic Four movie, directed by Tim Story, was released by Fox, the Cold War had been over for a while, and a new reason for the group to go into space was needed. So, in that movie, Reed specifically wanted to study a special cloud of cosmic energy that was supposed to pass near the Earth, and arranged to do so. No sneaking onto a spaceship this time. Unfortunately, Reed's calculations were off, and instead of safely measuring the storm from a distance, he and his teammates are bombarded fully by the DNA-altering energy, the effects of which are seen a few days later when they arrive back on Earth. The other big changes made to the origin story are twofold. First, Sue and Johnny now have legitimate reasons to be on this voyage. Sue is now a scientist herself, focusing on DNA, and Johnny is an ace pilot. Ben is also a pilot, but is put in a subordinate position to the younger man, much to his chagrin. Secondly, Victor Von Doom is also on the fateful voyage. He's somewhat shielded from the storm, so his changes come more slowly, which ties his origins in with the Fantastic Fours. In the comics, Dr. Doom has some past history with Reed Richards, but does not gain his powers from the same source as Reed and his team. While some details in the story were changed to update for the times, what the movie keeps from the comics is the most important thing in my opinion: the relationships. Reed and Sue have a romantic relationship. Although they're broken up at the start of the movie, by the end they're together. Sue is Johnny's older sister, who acts in a very motherly way towards the young man, and Ben and Johnny have a very antagonistic rivalry that plays out in a number of escalating practical jokes between the pair. These dynamics have stayed consistent throughout the nearly 60 years of storytelling in the comics. This movie and its sequel, Rise of the Silver Surfer, were spot on with most of their casting and really capture the mood of what is known as Marvel's first family. I also should say that these two movies have the best looking Thing. Ben Grimm's transformation is done practically and looks like it's straight from the comics. Now, let's move on to the 2015 reboot, directed by Josh Trank. This film's origin story hews much closer to the Ultimate Comics version of the Fantastic Four, written by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Miller. A quick reminder that the Ultimates universe was Marvel's attempt to create a new reader-friendly version of their characters, updating their origins to a more modern sensibility and leaving behind the 50-plus years of baggage that had been created by that point. In both the Ultimate FF and the 2015 Fantastic Four movie, instead of exploring space, Reed and company are exploring another dimension. De-aging the characters to high school/college age, Reed has invented a small dimensional transporter in his garage, and is recruited by the Baxter Foundation, run by Sue Storm's father, in order to work on a full-scale version so that this new dimension can be explored/exploited. Like in the 2005 movie, Victor Von Doom, or Victor Von Dom in the Ultimate Comics, is part of this team, unifying their origins together. In the comics, Victor sabotaged the experiment out of jealousy, which resulted in the accident granting the Fantastic Four and Doom their powers. The movie actually hews closer to the original comics with their inciting incident. After being told the team who created the device won't get to be the ones to explore this new dimension, Reed, Ben, Johnny, and Victor decide to fire up the transport on their own. Sue is the one who discovers their unauthorized trip after it's begun. Victor is lost on the planet they travel to in this other dimension when a strange energy starts destroying the world around them, and the three survivors are bathed in that energy during their return trip. The energy also bursts out upon their return, which is how Sue also got her superpowers. The 2015 Fantastic Four movie, sometimes jokingly referred to as Fant4stick, as the movie logo replaces the second A with a 4, got poor reviews and did not fare well at the box office either. But having now watched it, I have to say that while I do have some issues with it, especially in the final act and with Doom's character overall, also, please put pants on the thing. It's just undignified. Overall, it was a nice adaptation of the Ultimate Comics origin story in the first act, and the cast was pretty much spot on. So, what are the most important aspects of the Fantastic Four for future films? I love alliteration. Well, I've mentioned the first one a couple of times. Family. As I've said, the FF are often referred to as Marvel's first family. Reed and Sue are mother and father. In the comics, this is now literal, as the couple has 2 children, Franklin and Valeria, with Ben and Johnny acting as either kindly uncles or as children themselves, depending on when in the timeline you're talking about. The other important aspect of the team to get right is that they're not crime fighters. They're explorers. Unlike some other superheroes, you never see the Fantastic Four patrolling the city looking for crimes to stop. They're more interested in finding other planets and dimensions and getting into adventures that way. They explore the cosmos, and if they happen to find a planet-eating monster along the way, well, they'll stop them as best they can. But fighting supervillains isn't their reason for being. It's a side effect of their desire to learn everything they can about the universe they live in. And one last note, if anyone from Marvel/Disney is listening, let's leave Dr. Doom out of the first movie, except maybe an end credits tease. He's been in every single movie adaptation so far, and you haven't gotten him right yet. So let's let the Fantastic Four just be themselves for a film before you put them up against their arch nemesis. Perhaps they can fight Kang. I did promise I'd get back to him eventually, and here we are. For the uninitiated, Kang is a time-traveling despot from the far future who often returns to his distant past/our present, at first because he believes this era would be easier to conquer with its older technology, but quickly turning into a vendetta against the superheroes of this time period who consistently defeat him. He has a long and complex history that could be its own episode, But what's most relevant to this one is that his real name is Nathaniel Richards. Yes, like Reed Richards. It's been established that he is a distant relative of Reed and Sue Richards, aka Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman. Which is why Fantastic Four fans were excited to hear that he will be the villain in the upcoming Ant-Man 3, as that points the way to adding the FF into the MCU. Anthony, I hope that answers your questions. I love doing these sorts of comparisons between the movies and the comics, so if there's any other characters you'd like me to cover, be sure to send those requests in. Any questions you have that you want answered in a future episode, or just comments on the show in general, can be emailed at welcometogeektown, all spelled out, at gmail.com. Or, if you prefer to remain anonymous, just go to welcometogeektown, the number 2 in this case, .com, and click the Submit a Question link, and fill out the form there. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcometogeektown or Twitter @geektownpodcast. If you'd like to support the show directly, you can pitch in $1 per month at patreon.com/welcometogeektown to get access to audio outtakes, full scripts, and a monthly shoutout. If you want a free way to help out, don't forget to subscribe and give me a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show, so we can all tell them, welcome to Geektown, population, us. Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.